Good morning and welcome to our next live with Flint Change. I'm your host, Marianne Avery, and I'm joined by our founder, Alex Walker.
Good morning.
Today we're going to be doing a Q&A on leadership development and culture. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Alex. He's going to start us today with an overview of the leadership development work we've been doing over the last few months, just as a way of sort of setting the scene before we dive into the questions that everybody's shared. So Alex, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm just going to start with a couple. LinkedIn Lives are fairly short. I'm not going to spend loads of time talking at you, but programs that we've run actually just this month, two that I want to focus on. One is a real, an ambitious client who's growing fast. So big change in headcount and managers who have previously been quite technical and actually kind of moving up into management positions. So we've been working with them for nearly 2 years, and we started off with our culture audit, our Ignite Change audit. And one of the things that told us was that whilst it was a lovely place to be, it was very nurturing. And in fact, one of the shifts that they wanted to create was having more open conversations with people about performance, because actually what happened was that they left it quite a long time and some people became resentful, and then there became issues around that. So as part of a whole leadership program, one of the modules became about how to have open and honest conversations and how to be more comfortable with that. So it looked at the kind of mindset around it, how to create that shift and be okay with it, but equally some skills, frameworks, models to use. We've had great feedback from that. And I know one of the questions talks about embedding, and I'm going to pick up on how we've supported the embedding of that learning. So that's been a really interesting one. We started with managers, and actually they've now rolled that program out to the whole organization, that particular module, so that when managers are using that kind of language that we're going through in the module, everybody starts to feel comfortable with it, so that everybody's clear that actually, and in fact, their value around this is trust. Having open and honest conversations helps to create trust. If we're only telling people the good stuff or only telling people the bad stuff, trust is harder to develop. So we've loved that and had some great feedback. The second one that Marianne and I have run together is in a much larger organisation that potentially runs at a slightly slower pace. Huge amount of change over the last 2 years. Significant changes, some of it really quite difficult. Backdrop of government reform and backdrop of COVID. And they are also going through a 6-module leadership development program. And one of the modules I want to talk to you about was about delivering at pace. So it was a 2-day program that Marianne and I ran. The first day was really sort of project management disciplines, really putting some of the structure and discipline around delivering at pace and how we can get real clarity around what we're trying to achieve, what we need to deliver, and the scope of that work to make sure that we're not taking on too much. And then day 2 has been focused on how we keep people inspired, informed, and updated on the way that program's running. So we run this fabulous exercise where everybody has to, it's a big group, and everybody has to tag 2 other people, and they're asked to keep 2 meters away or in the middle of both of those people that they tag at any one time. And actually the room ends up being a bit chaotic. And the idea of, one of the objectives of that exercise is, in fact, with your project, if one thing changes, it becomes so crucial to make sure that everybody else is informed and that everything else after that actually does shift and move a bit. So lots of work on keeping people really engaged in that program. In particular, if you don't manage them and they come from a different part of the organisation, and actually their agenda and their focus and their objectives might not be, yours might not be really high on their list. So how we connect each of the elements of the organisation to deliver programmes or interventions or projects that will have massive impact on, they have a very ambitious strategy to get them out of this change. And again, we've had great feedback on that, haven't we?
We have, yeah, it's been a really great program to be involved with. So I think I'm going to stop you there and move on to some of the questions that have come through, because something like last time we ran out of time. So I'm just going to change the view and pop the first question up on the screen. I won't read it out, but I'll let you start answering it.
Okay, yeah, this is a great question, and one that quite often clients will talk to us about. So, we don't have necessarily full days to go into a full leadership development program. What can we do quickly? And I guess some of the things that we've done recently, one that you can do kind of almost straight away, is to put your leaders in a room together for 2 hours and work on a kind of group coaching basis. So them bringing their obstacles, their issues, their concerns, and the group coaching them through it. All of us deal with very, very similar things. Many leaders tell us that, performance, time, the well-being of their employees, the pressure and other commitments that are put on them. So, that's just a really easy one. You don't need anybody to help you to do that. We would happily help you put some questions together that would kick it off. But that's a really nice kind of low cost, easy way of starting. I guess the second one is to work through what the shift is. What is it that people need? So to give you an example of the trust one that I've just mentioned, there is small things that you can do in a bite-sized session that focus specifically on trust. What is getting in our way? So for this particular client, one real obstacle is the global overlay of cultures. So they have very, very different global cultures. So we've done doing some work on all understanding the global cultures a little better, and the way that we respond to things as in different countries, coming from different places, and exploring that it's okay that we sometimes react a bit differently or respond a bit differently, and understanding a bit more around why. I guess another one that we love, I spend a lot of time doing, is models like transactional analysis, Eric Burns' model, parent, adult, child, really helping people to understand perhaps why they get some of the responses from their people, and perhaps moving into more of a coaching style of management than a telling style of management, and the impact of using parental language as a manager as opposed to being in an adult ego state in a coaching type of environment. So, that's, for example, something that people can explore in a short period of time. And at some point, I really want to talk about the embedding piece, because sometimes if you do those kind of modules, there's got to be some follow-up and clarity on how that is embedded or used, or for people in particular who are more reflective, who want to be thinking through models like that.
That's a really good segue, actually, into one of the other questions we've got. I've just sort of moved them around again. So let me just share this one now. So this is one I know I'm particularly have been guilty of in the past. You go to a fantastic training session, but you get back to your desk and you start getting involved in whatever it was you left before you went to the training session, and don't necessarily stop and reflect, like you said, and take on board what you learned and put it into practice. So this is a really interesting question. So over to you.
It really is, and one that we feel quite passionately about, that people in our workshops generally love them. We get great feedback, but then they are kind of, they go back into their day job and they feel all of those pressures again, and actually they forget it. And in fact, there is some research that shows that, less than 10% of learning is moved and embedded into applying it in the organization, and that's tough. That's just a lot of cost that is hard for organizations to bear. And I guess when you add in some organizers who think, we've trained those people and then they've left because they used those skills to advance their career rather than to help their employees, I think this is why some organizations don't do as much learning and development as they would like. But I guess to get into the answer, there's a couple of things. One is, there was a study a few years ago by a group of psychologists, and one of the key things is the distance between the learning and the application. So really making sure that the learning is relevant for people and that they are able to apply that learning and use it within the workplace is crucial. So in most of our workshops, we have practice. where people do stop and they do practice that skill in a safe space. Sometimes the feedback is, that didn't feel completely natural because it was a forced sort of practice. We try wherever we can to use real individual scenarios. So I think we always have a follow-up. So the session that Marianne and I ran at the end of April, we have a follow-up on the 19th, just on a Zoom call, which starts the reflective, introverted people start to be in a position to ask questions and explore some of the themes more. And then we'll go into day 2 at the end of May. And then subsequently to that, there will be articles, information that exists as kind of psychological, reminders. And then subsequently to that, there should be another follow-up around, let's talk about how you've used that learning. Let's talk about some of the obstacles you found while you were using it, or the bits that worked really well. And then sort of pushing that learning on. So for us, it can never just be about a workshop. And one wonderful client we're working with at the moment, who are really passionate about their culture, the shift, really working for them. They've created what they've called a toolkit. So the managers go through each of the modules and then they have a toolkit online. And again, read a lot about this lately, digitalized learning. There's always ways of supplementing, say, a workshop learning with digitalized content, that subsequently happens. So their toolkit enables more learning, more psychological reminders, more reinforcement, then ready to go back into perhaps the next module, which will have a reflection of the previous module and how people have applied that learning. So absolutely crucial it's never a one-day workshop. It's always an ongoing learning process, I guess. And one more thing, because I know that you'll stop me because I was talking these things for too long.
Well, I was going to say, you sort of started to talk about culture. One of the other questions we've had is about culture.
Fine.
So go on, make your last point. Okay. All right. Okay. So the next question we've had come in is from someone who's looking to try and improve their culture, and how can they get their leaders to help make a difference? And I know you started to touch on that, so I thought I'd stop you.
Yeah, great.
Move on.
So client that we worked with, I think it was last year, Marianne, and they created their values, and they were looking for a culture shift away from a culture that was quite academic in its, there's lots of debating, but not always moving quickly enough to decisions and then implementing at pace. So one of the ways that we helped them was that we put together a workshop for the managers about those values. And it was about mindset, but there was lots of practical ways. It was a very practical workshop that said to managers, these are the values, which they'd been through a launch and they'd been heavily involved in creating them. Now, what do you need to do in your team that is different every day, that shows people that these values are relevant and helpful and useful? So one of their values was customer first. And so, one of the things we said is that's not a value that can just sit on a poster. Something needs to be done differently in order to show that the customer is at the heart of what we do. So, out of that came making sure that they weren't working in silos, and agreed between those managers that they would join up the processes between each of those departments to make sure that the customer journey worked all the way through. So, I always give the example of the refund. So when customer services get a call from a customer, they want to do a refund, but it doesn't get processed for 28 days. The customer might have phoned 3 times in that time. So actually customer first, is about some process change around making sure that value is real. So that's less kind of leadership development, but really high impact. And leaders felt that they walked out with something really practical that they could go away and do differently as a result of those values. So, and that contributes to culture shift. I think another one is one of our clients' values is team, or they have a pillar. It's called team. There's information below that. And, we've done some work on that global culture information. We've done some work on coaching, so that rather than, barking, I need this, it's a very, very fast moving financial services organization. They're actually they're doing some more work on coaching and helping people to buy into what they want them to achieve. So, it really depends on what that shift is. But there's, you can do anything from kind of bite-sized workshops with leaders all the way through to key kind of changes in what needs to happen. So actually, the project management process that we talked about earlier is really about culture shift. It's about saying, we've had a tough couple of years, we've got a really ambitious strategy. Actually, the shift we need is moving from debate and discuss to decide and implement.
Fabulous. Right, I'm going to move you on to our next question. Somebody's been asking about strategy. I know we've worked with a couple of clients that have had this challenge. So they're saying they've got a clear strategy and plan in place, but it's getting a bit stuck and they're not quite seeing the results they were hoping for. What can they do?
I've got a lot running through my head here, so you're going to have to rein me in. So I think one of the things that we have done a lot around this is what we would call strategy translation. So being really clear with all individuals throughout the organisation around what that strategy and plan means, all the way down to an individual level. So quite often strategies and plans are created, they go out on the internet, there's a launch, there's an email, but actually leaders, in particular in that kind of middle management, junior to middle management place, don't always have enough support to translate what that strategy means for their people. So all of the organisation should have their own plan that aligns directly into that strategy and that plan. And that should go all the way down to individual objectives. If there's people watching who say, Alex, that's not rocket science, I totally agree with you. It is not rocket science, but it is never, it is, we don't do it well enough, often enough. And we spend a lot of time doing workshops with smaller teams to be really clear on actually what they need to do differently, what their objectives and plans need to do in order to make something different. And for people who do follow us, they will have heard of the infection control process, where we did a lot of work pushing that right down into cleaners, porters, nurses, microbiologists, so that actually they have a real clear view and leaders are able then to manage people against what really matters. So I think that's the first one. I think the second is being explicit about the values and the culture around. There is actually a bit of a shift that we need to do to move towards this implementation. And this is really what's happening with this big client we're working with on this project management piece. So all of the 6 modules are focused on, being more commercial, understanding that we live in a VUCA world, but actually then being able to say, right, well, we've made this decision. Now we need to get some clarity on what this is. And we need to say, now we're moving to a place of certainty. Of course, things evolve, but how, now we've got that certainty, do we make sure that that program, initiative, project is delivered at pace? So that's a real focus on that implementation piece. Really happy to talk more to the person who put that in, because I could, again, talk for hours. This is what we're really passionate about, is strategies and plans are great, but until they are clearly translated through the organisation, people know what they need to do, and they have the skills to then move that into an implementation phase, and equally that they are empowered. So you're going to have to stop me in a minute, Maz. We talk about the dance floor, and that is, people having their clear boundaries around what they are empowered to do, because that's how it helps them deliver. Some leaders we talk to suck in their teeth at empowerment. It frightens them. But actually, empowerment, done in a kind of appropriate way, where people are set boundaries and they have clarity around what they're able to deliver, really that's what enables that implementation phase. And then what we say is, once you're in that dance floor, dance how you like. Be empowered to do it the way you want to do it, but have real clarity on what you need to do.
Yeah, I've just popped up on the screen the link to sign up to our newsletter if you're not already signed up. So that was a good little segue to pause you. So we've got one more question, so I'm just going to pop that up on the screen. So this is specifically, I would read that, they haven't actually said this, but I would read this around the fact that there is so much going on cost of living crisis as an example that everybody's affected by. So how, as a manager, can we help our leaders deliver whilst focusing on perhaps their own well-being and their team's well-being? I think it's a really critical question for the time that we're in at the moment.
It really is. And I think, again, we hear this a lot. It does feel like there is a lot going on for leaders at the moment. So I guess for me here, this would be to of course, to have a well-being strategy, and the CIPD have a really lovely well-being 7 pillars, so it takes into account things like financial well-being, mental health, physical, good leadership. So that's a really nice framework for people to be able to use, because it gives you a holistic view. But whilst it's really important to have a holistic well-being strategy, I also think that actually you need to be as individual here as possible and as bespoke as possible, because each of those leaders will have a different need. They'll have a different level of resilience given where they are in their life, what's happening with their own, cost of living, quiet quitting, what's going on with their kids or their parents. So for me, this would be about talking and listening. You'll know, Maz, when we do our Ignite Change audit, we mainly listen. We ask lots of questions and we listen. And it tells us we can never get over how powerful it is to go to people and genuinely hear what they want to say. And I think by doing that with leaders, being really clear on actually what do you need at the moment. So for some people, that's going to be hybrid working. For others, it's going to be more help translating the strategy. For others, it's going to be 2 or 3 people in their team who are struggling either from a well-being perspective, a performance perspective, and really not knowing how to manage that or cope with the emotion that comes with it. They might have people in their team who are struggling personally. So absolutely, holistic well-being strategy. We've done that for lots of clients, but then a real focus as much as possible on the individual approach with each of those leaders. So as a leader, start going to your people in those one-to-ones and starting it off with, how are you? What's going on for you? What are you finding tough right now? What are you finding really easy that you're really enjoying? And just getting a better understanding of that individual and what they need from you and the organisation.
Great. Well, that's it with the questions today. So I'm just going to pop up our newsletter sign up link again. So if anyone has a particular topic or subject they'd like us to discuss in our next LinkedIn Live, we haven't really got necessarily a rhythm, but we're sort of looking like we're probably doing one once a month. So please do comment, send either us a message. There is a new feature rolling out on LinkedIn where you're going to be able to start messaging pages directly. We don't have that yet, but as you all know, with these new changes on LinkedIn, they do roll out, so do keep an eye out. So it's been fabulous to talk to you all today. Have a great rest of the, what day is it? Wednesday, yes, and the rest of the week. Any final thoughts, Alex?
No, I really enjoy these, and it's really nice to speak directly to questions that people have. It's great, and it's ironic that they're the same kinds of questions that we're talking to clients about. So it's a thing.
Great stuff. Well, thank you, everybody, and see you sometime next month. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.